You've heard us talk about our 4 Exercise for Life principles, but how do you apply those principles when doing cardio? That's exactly what we're going to be discussing on this week's episode of the Exercise is Health podcast. We're going to cue our introduction, and then we're going to dive right into this conversation. Hey, welcome back, exercisers, to the Exercise is Health podcast, brought to you by Exercise for Life Studios, where we believe that your health is your most valuable asset. And the single best thing that you can do to both boost and protect this asset is exercise. Specifically, exercise is geared towards building the health and function of your muscles. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie.
And today we're exploring our 4 Exercise for Life principles and how you go about applying them to doing cardio. Because so often on this podcast, we are focused on resistance training, strength training, really utilizing the 4 Exercise for Life principles within that realm. But how do they apply to doing cardio? That's exactly what we want to discuss with you today. But before we do, we have a favor to ask of you.
That's right. A lot of people don't realize that podcasts like this thrive off of reviews from listeners like you. So if you wouldn't mind, give us a pause and scroll down to leave us a rating and review. It's going to help us so much in reaching a larger and larger audience and make sure that exercise is improving more and more people's health. Also, we have an OWA coming up on starting January 7th. If you're not familiar with the OWA, it's a 28-day long accountability group. We run it privately on Facebook, so it's just you guys and us. And we're going to be calling this one Moving and Mobile. And we're excited about bringing this to you because we're going to combine cardio and our reverse stretching principles that we talked about in the last 2 episodes. This one has been asked for many times, and I know in the new year it's a great time to start getting moving and mobile. So we're going to be combining cardio principles to keep you healthy and safe, and of course our mobility work to help you improve your flexibility as you continue on your fitness journey. So join us starting January 7th. You can get signed up by going to www.exerciseforlifestudios.com/OWA.
So today, again, this idea of our 4 Exercise for Life principles, if you've heard any of our content over the last really couple years, we started to highlight these principles more and more. Actually, not even a couple years, maybe like 15 months. We started to really highlight these principles more and more, but we tend to talk about it in regards to resistance training. When you're doing your strength training, when you're lifting weights, when you're using machines, using resistance bands, how do you go about making sure that you can do so in a way that builds your health, strength, and function without feeling achy, sore, or injured, all right? And so that's where the 4 Exercise for Life principles come into play. But what about with cardio? Because with cardio, it seems like it should be different. Like in our minds, it should be different than lifting weights. But is it? That's what we're talking about.
That's right. You know, I think it's so interesting that as I've slowly over the years, adopted this idea of changing my brain from exercise is like something fun, now it's something that's competitive, and now it's something that strictly is used to improve my health. I don't ever want to do a exercise bout that makes me feel worse or less healthy or less ready to do stuff, right? And one of the big things that comes especially from cardio is joint issues and muscle issues. Reason being is that every single cardio thing that I can think of, other than for me personally, flying in an airplane because it makes me so nervous. It's a really great cardio. I don't even know if that would be like the same benefits because I'm not squeezing my muscles anyways. You know what I'm saying. My heart rate goes way up when I'm in an airplane. Anyways, when you're doing exercise that's cardio-based, you're trying to increase your heart rate. The thing is that there are so many repetitions. So think about like when you go do your weight training, you might do, 10 bicep curls or, 3 sets of 8 squats. But when you go for a run, or you get on the elliptical, you do swimming laps, or you get on the bike, anything that's cardio, you go for a walk, whatever you're doing for cardio, it's like the goal is like 8,000 steps or 8,000 repetitions. So if you think about that, it's like this thing has to be pretty darn safe, right? Because we're about to do it 8,000 times in a row, or however many thousands of times that you're going to do it, 2,000 times. That's still a lot of reps when you think about it. And so the thing is that we still want to teach you how do we take this thing that's going to be very repetitive and potentially very wearing on your body and make sure that you can do it because there's immense benefits from doing cardio, but it can't be degrading your body. It can't wear away your joints. It can't leave you feeling like you've strained and pulled every muscle because it has a very high chance of doing that just because of the nature of the activity. You're going to do so many reps.
Absolutely. And not only are you going to do a lot more reps when you're doing cardio, but the stress to your body is likely going to be less specific to certain joints, to certain groups of muscles. So for example, take a leg extension exercise or whatever. That is a very specific stress. It's a very specific challenge to a specific set of joints and specific group of muscles. A leg press, a squat, a deadlift, a shoulder press. Okay, it's all a very specific challenge to a very specific set of joints and a very specific group of muscles. When you start doing cardio, it starts to become a lot less of a specific challenge and much more of a general challenge, much more dispersed throughout your system. Okay, if you're looking at for walking, for example, you think, oh well, it's just my lower body. It's like no, like your core is going to be involved, your arms are going to be involved, and then any progression from walking, whether it's jogging, running, sprinting, it's all going to just involve those areas more and more and more. Cycling, okay, you're like, oh well, cycling is just my legs. Yeah, except you're also holding yourself up with your arms, you're holding yourself up with your core, so like your whole body is involved in some way. Swimming, clearly entire body involved. Rowing, clearly entire body involved. Even using like the elliptical or something like that, entire body involved. So what this means is the more areas of your body that get involved, the less specific the challenge becomes to any one of those areas, and the more dispersed the challenge can become, which is in part a large reason why you're able to do it for a longer period of time, because the relative intensity for any group of muscles, the relative stress for any one group of joints is way, way lower when you're doing cardio versus when you're doing your resistance training, you're doing your strength training. So, but it usually gets made up, it usually gets made up by the fact that there are way more repetitions. The duration is way longer, and that's really where the challenge aspect comes into play. Because remember, the whole idea of exercise is challenging your muscles with the intent of improving the health and function of your body. And so with cardio, you still need to challenge your muscles, but the challenge aspect usually comes from the duration of doing it versus the intensity and the specificity, which is where it usually comes from with strength training and resistance training. Okay, so with that in mind, it's like, all right, we have this activity that's relatively lower intensity, that is done for a longer duration, and is going to involve a lot more areas of our body. How do we go about doing this in a way that builds our health, builds our strength, builds our function, and that we can keep coming back to, because the repetitions are so very, very high? And that, again, is where the 4 exercise for life principles come into play. So the first exercise for life principle is to use your full symptom-free range of motion. Okay, I said that a little bit backwards. It's your symptom-free full range of motion. Okay, so what this means is when you're running or when you're cycling or when you're swimming, there shouldn't be a part of your pedal stroke or your swim motion or your gait, your running stride that is painful. Like, you want to stay within the part of that motion that feels good for your body, that is symptom free, where the only things that you're feeling are your muscles squeezing, your muscles fatiguing, your muscles working, but you're not feeling your joints, you're not your joints zinging, you're not feeling any kind of stretching feeling. You are just feeling your muscles working and eventually your muscles fatiguing.
That's right. So when we think about applying this, it's so much easier to think about it with resistance training, because in resistance training, you can modify the heck out of it, right? Wow, the bottom 2 inches of my squat are hurting me, so I leave it out and I do the rest of the squat. But what if you're like, well, I went for a run and like this section of the run is hurting my joints? So you really have 2 choices here, right? So you can decide, let's take off the intensity and see if I can warm up my muscles. Because as you guys have listened, the reason we say stay in your pain-free range of motion is because when you stay in your pain or symptom-free range of motion, your body will generally like strengthen the muscles and then give you more, right? If it can, right? So, and obviously we only want it to give you more if you can, otherwise we're really vulnerable to injury. So you can lessen the intensity of whatever you're doing, so maybe slow your run down and see if you can kind of, I don't want to say work through it, but allow your body to kind of catch up to what you're doing. Or if you can modify your range of motion, that is really helpful, just like in the resistance training. I one time said this to one of my women that came into the studio here, and she was like, what do you mean? A running stride is a running stride. How do I change that? So we practiced. We got on the treadmill, we ran back and forth here in the studio, and we practiced doing little tiny like bunny steps. That was all we did. But after about 2 minutes of that, her body was ready for more. So then she could increase her range of motion. Just know anytime that you decide to turn off your brain and allow the pain to exist while you're exercising, it's your body saying no and your brain saying yes. And so we have to be mindful of that because our bodies are trying to manage whatever we have going on in our bodies, which we don't always know, right? We don't want to like blow out our knee and the whole time we were getting signs, but our brain was like, no, I must push through to get my 2 miles in. We want to be respectful of it. So do things like change your intensity to see if your body can catch up to the rhythm that you're trying to go, even if it's like mid-run or mid-swim and you're like, I should be totally warmed up by now. It's okay. You can pull it back a little bit and see if your body will catch back up, or you can change your range. So changing your stride length, changing how far back you're pulling in the row, change the ranges that you're choosing for your cycling. Maybe it's feeling better sitting down, standing up, standing way up, or standing up and bent over. All the different options, staying in the ranges that feel like I'm here and I can just work without symptoms of telling me not to do it. And always remember, the symptom is your body telling you, we should really be thinking about this. And right now I'm saying no. And instead of saying like, pain is just always there, I just push through it. That's just how I operate. So keep those two ideas in mind. So pull back the intensity to see if your body can give you more range so that you can stay in a pain-free range, or change your range temporarily to see if your body will warm up to give you more range in a few minutes.
Exactly. Now, principle number 2 is to control your moving and non-moving segments, or what areas of your body you're moving and what areas of your body are staying still. And again, with resistance training, this, is very clear cut. Hey, when you do a shoulder press, hold these parts of your body still and only move these parts. And we typically call that our form, okay? Well, when you do cardio, there is a certain form that goes along with that as well. There's your running form, there's your swimming form, there's your cycling form, and everything like that, okay? It's not just kind of like mindless motion and you're just going. And as you get more and more fatigued, it's highly likely that your form will start to break down. When we take this to the extreme, you may have seen, the images or videos of, people finishing their triathlon or their ultra marathon or something. They're literally like crawling across the finish line because their body's so exhausted and depleted. It's highly unlikely that you are working out to that level of exhaustion or depletion. However, the changes in form and the changes in function will start to occur much earlier than that extreme as well. And so it may feel like if I'm going out for, a 3 mile run or whatnot, I start off and I'm like, some areas of my body aren't, moving as well as I might like. Okay, I'm just going to stay within my symptom-free range of motion. And then as my body gets warm, I get, more acclimated to the level of exertion. Okay, cool. Now my range of motion is increasing. And then if I'm really pushing myself and I'm already coming into the run a little bit depleted, I might notice like that last half mile or that last quarter mile, like something feels weird, a little bit weird, like through my trunk or my hip, or my calves might start feeling like they're tightening up and stuff. And it's like, okay, well, you know what? I'm still going to kind of push at the exertion level that I was before. Now, all of a sudden, I might start feeling my body moving in different ways in order to try to keep my pace up, or in order to try to keep my time up, or, whatever it is, okay? We're saying when you get to that point where you're noticing, hey, my body's moving in different ways than it was before, and in order to try to keep the form that I had before, I need to just kind of like override that and just kind of push through. We're saying, no. That's where you need to start changing your level of exertion. That's where you need to start making it a little bit of a slower run or a little bit easier level on the cycle bike, or slow things down with your swimming or your rowing or whatever it is, right? Essentially, that's where you start to back off to make sure that whatever form you're wanting to keep, that you are able to maintain that throughout the entirety of your workout.
Yeah, this is a big one. And I think that so often we will compromise little parts of our form because cardio is one of those things that is like notorious for like, you push through, or we're celebrating the push through. We're celebrating the person that's like dragging their feet across the finish line, even though now they won't be able to walk for 3 weeks. So, I mean, if that's what you're into, that's great, but it's definitely not going to improve your health. So remember, this podcast is about taking you from doing sport-like things and compromising your health to now promoting your health. So again, we want to see that as you're doing your cardio, that you're not compromising your form, right? So we want to see that even as you're fatiguing. And this is a hard one because a lot of people, again, we feel like we just got to push through, but just recognize that there can be risks with that. And we're not saying you shouldn't push through. There are hard things that you get to push through, just not in compromise of your joint mechanics and your health, right? So making sure that you're not getting sloppy on your bike form, even though you're pushing through at the end, right? So there's a difference between I have impeccable form, I'm getting really tired, and this is a really big push. Awesome, great, you're staying in your symptom-free range of motion, and you're keeping your form. Versus, I'm really tired, I'm pushing through, I really want to get this last push, and I can't maintain my form because that's how tired I am, but I'm pushing through anyways, right? So two different things. So we want to see that you do maintain your form, and you're not modifying your form. Unlike the range of motion one, we want to see you modifying your range of motion according to how your body feels. We don't want to see you modifying your form or your moving versus non-moving parts due to how you're feeling.
Absolutely. Now, principle number 3 is to move slowly. And this is one that often gets confused as far as like what we actually mean by that. See, a lot of times when people hear move slowly, they think it's a specific time or a specific tempo or even a specific speed that they need to move. And what we're saying is it's not necessarily a specific speed, but rather you're moving at a speed that you're able to maintain control of your moving and non-moving segments. So if you are moving too fast, you're not going to be able to control the parts of your body that are moving and the parts of your body that aren't moving nearly as well as if you are moving with more control, moving slower, okay? And so that's really where this principle comes in. And so when you think about doing cardio, like if you go for a walk and you feel like, okay, cool, like I can control my body really well. And then you go to bring it to a jog and then to a run and then you're to a sprint and then you're doing a sprint where you feel like you're really going all out and you're getting more and more tired. You're feeling like I just need to kind of fling my body through this motion in order to kind of, get to my end goal of either crossing the finish line or, finishing out the 60 seconds or whatever it is. Is that, okay, now we're violating that third principle because now you're moving too fast to the point that you're not able to maintain control of your moving and non-moving segments. So really we're not only violating the third principle, we're also violating the second principle, okay? And so again, when it comes to doing your cardio, the speed is likely going to be faster than you would move just in general than you would when you're doing your resistance training, okay? But the principle still stays intact because the speed at which you're moving needs to make sure that you're able to control your moving and non-moving segments.
That's right. So remember, this move slowly principle, it translates really well with weight training because you're like, oh, move slow. But what we really mean is you move slow so that you're in control. So some examples of this is I'm big into riding my cycle bike. And so as you go into like a faster interval, if you don't have enough resistance on there, then the flywheel starts like taking your legs for you, right? So I am essentially out of control because I'm not controlling the flywheel. The flywheel has just gained enough momentum that it's going, right? So that would be my cue. Hey, I need to add more resistance to this so that I'm staying in control of my motion while I'm increasing my speed. Or for example, when you stand up, then my whole body weight is now on my feet rather than just my leg weight. And so I will need more resistance so that I don't move out of control. Another example of this is sprints. If you're sprinting on outside, like on floor, or you know what I'm saying, like on the ground,
pavement.
the pavement, yeah. Or if you're sprinting on a treadmill, right? You still want to make sure you're in control so that you're able to control whether you're getting injured or not, really. So always think about that. Like even though we're not moving slowly, like the principle says and how it easily translates into resistance training, the goal with the moving slow is to stay in control. So even as you're adding more speed, you're still feeling as if you're in control. And the idea of this control is still this idea that the muscle is moving me. I'm not moving just with momentum. I'm moving because my muscle is in control. And so you can always check yourself. Like, am I just, like the example with the bike is a really easy one. Am I just going fast? Or there's these treadmills, the Woodway treadmills.
Sure.
If you're not familiar with that, it's all that you don't like turn it on. It's just powered by your legs. And so sometimes people can get going really fast on that. I do think there's enough resistance on that it doesn't get too out of control. But I would imagine there's a point there where you're just kind of sprinting on it's like a hamster wheel basically.
Exactly.
And you're going way too fast and then you're out of control.
Yes. Yep, exactly. So then principle number 4 is to focus on squeezing your muscles. And this can feel really weird when you're doing cardio. Like to consistently try to think about like squeeze my quads, squeeze my glutes, squeeze my hamstrings, squeeze, like everything, like when you're going for a run. First of all, like we said in the introduction, there are so many muscles involved, all right, that to try to focus on squeezing all of them, it's like, okay, well, should I focus on squeezing my hip flexors on my left leg and my glutes on my right leg, like at the same, like that gets really confusing, right? And that feels really overwhelming. So the way you actually go about doing this is you're not focused on the squeeze during every single second like you are when you're doing resistance training, but you bring your mind back to the squeeze and back to check in on how your muscles are doing consistently throughout your workout. Okay, and depending on your current level of fitness, depending on the intensity of your workout, depending on how long your workout is, that time window of which you go back and just kind of check in on your body, check in on your muscles, that will vary. Okay, it might be every minute you are checking in. You're like, okay, cool. Like, can I go another minute? How are my muscles doing? Okay, yeah, I'm good. Like, I'm not noticing anything feeling weird. All right, great. It might be every 3 minutes, every 5 minutes. I really wouldn't recommend going longer than every 5 minutes of just doing kind of an internal check, which I know for a lot of people will actually feel like they're doing it really often because we like to throw on our podcast. We like to throw on our show and just kind of zone out when we're doing cardio, just, vibe with our music and just go with it. Okay. If you're listening to, a music playlist, you might check in at the end of every song. But here's the thing. Those check-ins are what's going to allow you to pick up sooner that, something's going weird with my body. All right. You're not going to have to wait until the end of your 30-minute or 45-minute run to be like, yeah, something feeling weird now. You can check in sooner and then make the necessary changes. And that's really where the benefit of this fourth principle comes into play with cardio.
Right. So the focus on the squeezing muscle is the idea here, which again translates so easily to weight training. All you have to do is focus on squeezing your muscles. Is just taking that internal approach, right? Is like making sure that you're gauging your exercise relative to how your insides are feeling, not how the outsides are doing, right? Because a lot of times with cardio, we're like, I'm going for 30 minutes. And that's like just a period statement. I'm done, right? But what if it's like, hey, what you get to 27 minutes and now your knee is really bothering you? You just push through? Well, some people choose to. Some people might hear this principle and be like, hey, well, I don't know. Maybe I'll just stop. 27 was good because my body was telling me to stop, right? So it's having this system of I think that some people are just good at listening to it all the time. But if you're not very good at it, because a lot of times the goal of cardio is like tune out, right? Tune into whatever your zenness or your scenery or whatever it is, which I think is a great practice to do, but it's to making sure that you're regularly tuning into your body. Make sure everything's going okay. There's nothing telling you need to stop. And you're just making sure that this workout is still like a work in to your body to promote your health. And it doesn't kind of degrade your joint quality afterwards.
Exactly. So the 4 exercise for life principles still apply when doing cardio, and they really are the keys to making sure that your cardio is not only continuously building the health and function of your body, but also is something that's sustainable for your body that you're able to keep coming back to without it breaking down your body. So if you're finding that your cardio workouts are leaving your body achy, sore, like your joints aren't doing well after, revisit these 4 exercise for life principles and figure out which one of those is which ones or which single one is or are not intact when you are doing your cardio workouts, and then go and reapply them. Make sure that you're following these 4 exercise for life principles when you do your cardio workouts. And if you're looking for guidance on how to do this, we actually have a great program within the Exercise for Life membership that's called Nothing But Cardio. And the program is straight cardio workouts where we show you exactly how to apply each of these 4 principles within a cardio type setting. So you can try that program absolutely for free by going to www.exerciseforlifestudios.com. Again, it's called Nothing But Cardio. Not only will you get access to that program, you'll get access to all the other programs within the Exercise for Life membership when you sign up at www.exerciseforlifestudios.com. So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that enjoys doing their cardio, but they're finding that it's breaking down their body? Their knees are aching, their back is tightening up, their feet are bugging them, and they don't really know what to change about doing their cardio. Those are signs that the 4 exercise for life principles are not being followed when they're going and doing their cardio. And so they need to reinstill one or all of the 4 exercise for life principles within their workouts. Share this episode with them so they can understand how to go about doing that. And while you're online, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps people find our podcast when they're looking for information on exercise and they're looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us that 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week.
This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Gates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.